Hello, welcome to the Ascent of Mount Carmel YouTube channel. Today we're discussing the 11th chapter of the second book of Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross. This is a pretty interesting chapter, and there's a lot to it, so we're going to split this chapter up into 3 installments. In the first book, St. John talked about the knowledge that we receive naturally through the bodily senses, and he instructed us to darken ourselves to our bodily senses during our dark night of the soul. Our mortification of our senses was just the first step of our ascent. In this chapter, St. John discusses phenomena that come supernaturally by the way of the outward bodily senses. St. John is introducing us to these supernatural phenomena of the senses, which he calls visions of the soul. However, in the following chapters, he suspends his discussion of them, and then he moves on to covering topics like the imagination and then imaginary visions. Please note, however, that St. John will come back to spiritual visions of the soul in the 23rd chapter. At that point and in subsequent chapters, he'll break them down and describe the various kinds and their various causes. St. John tells us that this is not an unusual thing to occur after we have mortified our senses. It may occur to a greater or lesser extent to different people. In regard to sight, some people might see saints, they might see angels, either good or fallen angels. They might see extraordinary lights and brightness. Some people, in addition to this, might experience something to the sense of sound, and they might hear those figures speak. Other people might hear the speaking or sounds, but they don't see a person talking. In regard to the sense of smell, some people smell sweet scents without knowing where they came from. And it's said that for Marian apparitions, they're often accompanied by the smell of roses. In regard to the sense of taste, some people are conscious of the sweetest or most delectable tastes, yet they don't come from eating food. The most frequent type of this experience is reportedly related to the sense of touch. In this case, it might feel that there's a touch that's touching you inside of your head. People refer to this as the touch of God. St. John tells us that with this phenomenon, it's as though the bones and the marrow rejoice. All these phenomena are not the same things as religious ecstasy. With religious ecstasy, a person becomes totally oblivious to all things of the senses. But with these phenomena, a person remains totally aware of everything that is going around him. This is a video clip of someone who seems to be faking religious ecstasy because she reacts to someone making a threatening gesture toward her face. The first time that a person is visited by the phenomenon of the senses that we're talking about, the person is likely to notice that their appearance tends to be linked with holy things, such as the Mass or praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
Can other things cause you to levitate?
Other things? Holy things.
Yeah, holy things. What holy things?
The Holy Mass?
Oh, yes, we know about that.
Although these things may be from God, we must never rely on them or accept them. We must always ignore them without trying to determine whether they're good or evil.
We know that St. John of the Cross says that the more corporal the experience, the alleged supernatural experience, and the more tangible it is, the less certain it is from God.
So the more exterior and corporeal they are, the less likely they are to be from God. So if you have a saint or a dead relative who suddenly shows up in your living room and starts talking to you, that's less likely to be from God. This is because God is more likely to communicate to us through our spirit, where there's greater security and more benefit for the soul. With communications to the senses, there's a greater chance for deception. And this is because when we receive manifestations through our senses will judge and evaluate whether the spiritual manifestations are as the senses think they ought to be. However, spiritual things are unlike anything that bodily senses have ever experienced.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson! Danger!
If you value and esteem this type of phenomenon, you're going to be exposing yourself to a great danger of being deceived. Not only that, if you cling to them and you dwell on them, it'll be a complete impediment to any further advance.
Got stones in my pathway, and my road seems dark and blind.
This is because even though these things may be supernatural, they're still related to the bodily senses. And between spiritual things and bodily things, there's no proportion or resemblance. For this reason, we must always assume that these things come from the devil and not from God. The devil can more easily deceive a soul through the senses than he can by that which is interior or spiritual. The more exterior that these forms and objects are, the less benefit they are to our interior and spiritual nature. This is due to the lack of proportion between the corporeal and the spiritual. Since these phenomena are communicated supernaturally, St. John does not deny that there's a degree of spirituality involved with them. However, it is less than would be the case if they were communicated by interior and spiritual means. For this reason, these phenomena can easily pave the road for error and presumption to grow in the soul. Also, since they are so tangible, the soul may attach great importance to them, which paves the way for vanity and pride. When we experience these phenomena, they can insidiously cause us to become complacent and lose our humility. Because of them, we might start to believe that we're specially important. The devil knows how to make us satisfied with ourselves. He can produce in us a desire for these phenomena, which may turn us away from God while we're telling ourselves all the while that we're pursuing God. Therefore, these phenomena must always be rejected. The worst thing that we can do is go after these things and try to bring them about. If we invite these phenomena, we're almost certainly going to start relying on them as a guide and try to use them toward our ascent to divine union. However, this will actually stop us dead in our tracks from making any progress whatsoever. And actually, this is the best case scenario of what can happen if we do rely on these things. The more attention we pay to this type of thing involving the senses, the further we're going to stray from the narrow path, which is faith. St. John tells us that even if these phenomena do come from God, he is not offended when we reject them. When they come from God, the effect and the fruits that he desires to produce in the soul happen almost immediately. The reason for this is that when God gives us any kind of supernatural phenomenon, it produces its effect on the soul when it first appears, without giving the soul any time or opportunity to think about whether it's going to accept or reject them. When God does give us these things supernaturally, he produces in the soul the effect that he desires independent of the soul's capacity and without any effort on the soul's part. The effect comes about in a passive manner, and the acceptance or non-acceptance isn't made by our will. The effects penetrate the soul and move it to love, which the soul can't resist any more than, say, a window can resist the sun's rays from penetrating it. St. John makes an analogy of somebody who accidentally steps into a fire with his bare foot, and it doesn't make any difference if that person wants to be burned or not. The fire will do what it'll do, despite the person's wishes. It's the same way with visions and representations that come from God. They will produce the desired effect. When these things come from God, they're very effective in positively affecting our souls. When they come from the devil, they're not equally effective in negatively affecting us if we reject them. The devil can only set in action the first movements of this. It's up to us to either accept it or to reject it. So we determine where it goes from there. In order for it to have negative effects, we must in effect consent to it. We'll be back with another episode discussing this chapter shortly. In the meantime, please pray for the church.
Got stones in my pathway, and my road seems dark at night. I got stones in my pathway, and my road seems dark at night. I have a pain in my heart that had taken my appetite.